Hello. Plugged in. Hello, hello. Aztecs. Back to yes, I Hello, everybody coming on in. We've got a little bit less than 10 minutes before I'm going to get started. Grab yourself a coffee, and we'll be getting started in a little bit. Ooh. Forgot to unmute myself. Hello, everybody. So if you're just coming in, we've got a little bit less than 5 minutes before I'll get started. Down in the chat, I've got kind of an agenda of what we're hopefully going to get to cover today. So just sort of heads up, and we'll get started in a couple minutes. How's it going, everybody?
I'm all right. How are you?
I have been up since 5, so I'm all right, relatively speaking.
Okay.
Okay.
Only in a Zoom today? Like a lecture?
Yes, we'll have a formal lecture today.
Okay.
Just giving it like another minute to let people filter in.
All right. I'm gonna mute loud animals.
So if you're still just coming in, there is kind of an agenda down in the Zoom group chat. I will do my best to try to keep an eye on that chat. If you guys see like, oh my God, somebody's asking a question 6 times, get my attention. Another thing I'd like to try to do to kind of maintain a little bit of semblance of order, you all should have a function where you can raise a hand, and a little icon's going to pop up on my screen. Can somebody try to do that to confirm that you can do that? Because I can't do it on my end. Okay. I'm seeing Maria Gonzalez. Cool. So at least one of you knows how to do that. So this will be probably the easiest way for me to actually be able to answer questions in a reasonable way. One of my other classes got a little bit rowdy isn't the right word, but it was a little difficult to manage all the questions I had at once. So if you do have a question or a comment or whatever, do the raise your hand icon. That'll let me know that you got a question. And I can find some kind of stopping point to let you ask your question. Okay, so first official formal lecture. For virtually every class like this, I'm going to put an agenda in the chat. Most of the time it's so that I can remember to tell you something, but it also gives you the opportunity, if you come in a minute or two late, to say, okay, this is what we're talking about. Also be aware that these lectures are recorded. So if you don't have a shirt on, maybe put a shirt on. But more importantly, if you are late to class or you're sick or something, you can't come, these will be posted on YouTube. I'm going to try to get our lecture up right after class today. So be aware of that. But let me just start with announcements. I don't know that I have a ton, but usually Brightspace is my go-to for any kind of anything I need to point out to you. Let me bring up Brightspace. There we go. So I put up a kind of update week 2 announcement as a sort of heads up for today. Big important thing that I got out last week, and then again on Monday, is that we're pushing back that first discussion. So if you've already done it, good on you, but it is not going to be due until Wednesday, September 9th. My goal was to give you a little bit more time ahead of that first assignment, and to cover a little bit of material, and basically ask you if you have questions before you dive right into it. So let's take a second there. Does anybody have questions about the first discussion? Have you started working on it over the weekend or anything? And I'm not going to like go through the document itself or something, but does anybody have questions about this first assignment?
I have a question about the book.
Yeah. Sam?
Will you show us how to access our ebook? Like if we bought it I'm not sure. Like if I think I might have found it like in the content and you click on textbook, is that?
Okay. So what you're referring to, jump over to here, is my effort to just kind of let you know what the book is. So if you do go into content, and syllabus, I think, there's this kind of graphic link for the book. As far as I know, this does not actually link you to the book itself. This is just my effort to let you know this is what the book looks like. This is the book you need. I think this link specifically takes you to the bookstore website. So if you've ordered the ebook on your own, then you should have some kind of access website. But
No,
that's
like I just what do you mean access website? Because like I ordered the ebook, but like
Oh.
it doesn't tell me where to go to get it. Like
okay.
to read it.
That I can't tell you. I've never done that process before.
Okay.
If anybody else here knows the ins and outs of ordering an e-textbook through the bookstore,
Like I got it ordered, but it doesn't like tell you where to go open it up. Like I mean, it didn't tell me at least.
okay.
Like in my other class, he showed us how to access our ebook, and it's just like a little link like you just showed us, and it takes us to it.
Okay.
I'm having the same issue with mine.
They're supposed to give you a link in the bookstore like a day after you buy the textbook if you go back to like your order.
Oh, so if I go back to like where I like my bill or whatever, I don't know. I'll check.
Did you create an account in the Pellissippi bookstore?
I don't know if I just used my account, like my financial aid money for on my account for the bookstore. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. You should be able to go back into it and then just pull up your most recent orders, and then it'll show each textbook, and then you can go request activation code or something like that.
All right, I'll try it after this. If I can't get it figured out, I'll literally just call Pellissippi.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. And yeah, Sam, I'm sorry I can't like tell you the ins and outs. I've never ordered a book through the Pellissippi bookstore. But I'd say when in doubt, call them or email the bookstore. They'd be a lot more knowledgeable about that. But on my end of things, I haven't provided any kind of link to a textbook or access to a textbook. I'm just giving you the title and like a picture of the book. But other questions about the discussion or Brightspace or, we covered a whole lot of stuff last week. Okay, silence means no. So.
I'm late. Trouble with the Zoom again.
Okay, well, I can see you and hear you now.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Okay, so update on the discussion assignment, and just, kind of a heads up a little more broadly. I did post on Friday. I don't know if this is a great name for it, but Wellness Friday, something like that. Basically coping things for stress and anxiety that have helped me a whole lot through the spring and the summer, and I just kind of want to share this stuff with you. I don't expect you to like buy into the hippy dippy nature of some of these things, but at least give it a shot. Mindfulness has been something that's really helped me, and I've mentioned a couple podcasts here and linked to the host of a podcast. You might be interested in checking that out, and if you're not, ignore it. That's fine. But more immediately, let's jump back into where we left off last week. We were in the midst of a sort of introduction to studying history. I know that we got about as far as talking about primary sources and secondary sources, correct? Somebody help remind me.
Yes.
Okay, I hear a yes.
Yes.
So we are probably here, correct? So let's refresh our memories a little bit. Who can remind us how we defined what a primary source and a secondary source were?
Sorry, I don't know about raising my hand. Primary sources are like things that they're things that were written and or documented when the event happened. Yeah.
So it's a source that's created in a time period, often commenting on a time period, but it's we could say it's primarily connected. It is directly connected to a certain time period. So our diary from a Civil War soldier is a primary source. If they fought in the war, of course, that would be a primary source. But even that soldier's wife, her diaries or her letters would also be a primary source because she lived during the Civil War. Secondary sources are not connected to past events. So your textbook is, going to be a secondary source on everything we're covering this semester. Your author is not 150 years old, so he's not around during the Civil War. But those are kind of the two main types of sources that historians use. But then that then begs a question, well, what does a historian do with these kind of sources? And generally, most historians, if they're writing a book or making a documentary or even teaching a class like this, they have a thesis. They have an argument they want to make to their audience. So if any of you are familiar with kind of the scientific method and stuff from a hard science class, like not a difficult science class, but like a chemistry class, you're probably familiar with this. You probably heard of a hypothesis before. So let's start with that, because historians do kind of take their methodology from the science world. Who could give us a definition of a hypothesis?
An assumption based on evidence.
Yeah, an assumption based on evidence, right? And that evidence is collected through what? I'll just throw it to you, Nelson. Yeah, observation, right? So hypothesis could be something as simple as an acid and a base. If we mix them together, will create a reaction, right? And then you test that by conducting an experiment. So historians do sort of the same thing. We aren't mixing Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, but we're going to prove something to you. We're going to say, okay, this is what I think caused a certain event or influenced a person. And I'm going to use primary source evidence coupled with what other historians have said to give you that interpretation, whatever that thesis is. So a thesis can be a lot of things, especially in the realm of history. It can be something as simple and straightforward and basic as, here's how the Civil War happened, starting in 1860 until 1865. Here's just like the date and data information, right? So it could be something as simple as that. It could be something more complex, though, as well. You could say, well, here's all the economic things that led to the Civil War. Here's the social and political elements that led to the Civil War. Here's the role that women played at the beginning of the Civil War. So you've got this whole kind of universe of ways of looking at things, or perspectives of looking at things in a book or a documentary or a class. So before we move on to this last point and then dive into the lecture, are there questions at this point about what a primary source is, what a secondary source is, what this kind of thesis building is? No. Okay. So then you might be asking, well, okay, if every historian has a thesis and they want to prove something to you, what is your thesis for this class? I have a few over the course of this semester, and I'm trying to get my PowerPoint back up here. So I have a couple of ideas I want to kind of examine over the next 13 weeks or so. The biggest, broadest idea that I have, broadest thesis that I have in all of my classes is that there is no single interpretation of the past. And this is really, important to me and really important that you understand. There are some absolute truths in the realm of history. We can all pretty much agree that the Nazis were bad, right? But even that could have a little kernel of like, well, it wasn't bad for everybody. Those who were employed by the Nazi government or who were involved in the war industry, they were doing really well during the Second World War. But really, really broadly, there's multiple interpretations, and a history course or history book is not just wrote data and information. There's a argument in there almost always. For this class, for my lecture content, we've got three main ideas we're going to look at. Number one, the founders were not perfect people. They're not these gods sent to Earth who had this sort of foreordained idea for what the country was. Quite frankly, this country has been messed up since its very founding, and we'll talk about some of the kind of messiness of the revolution and the years after that. Piggybacking on that, the Civil War starts in 1787. When the Constitution is written, slavery is a de facto accepted institution, and that is going to lead inevitably to the war in 1860, and we'll track that over the next couple of weeks. And then a little more broadly, we've never had complete freedom in this country, and that's really a big theme of the book. Give me liberty. How do we define liberty? How do we define freedom in the United States? And how does that change? In your textbook, if you have the combined Volume 1 and Volume 2, you're going to be tracking that across all of American history. In this class, of course, we're stopping at roughly the Civil War. Okay, so some really kind of broad, more academic ideas before we jump into the first chapter in the lecture material. Are there questions before we move on? Okay, so let's dive right in then with chapter 1. And we are looking at a new world. And whenever I read this chapter title, I always think of Aladdin. A whole new world. But really, you know, what we're talking about is this massive kind of, I mean, civilization changing event called the Columbian Exchange. We'll touch on that a little bit more in some more detail later. But we're really looking at how 3 or 4 different societies kind of smack into each other, and what is created from that, which then leads to eventually the United States. So quick, warning here. For the first 5 weeks, we're not talking about the United States at all. The United States doesn't exist at the beginning of this class. We're starting around 1400, give or take a couple decades. So really, we're not going to start referencing the United States until about week 5 or 6. But we're going to be starting with our first society, the kind of first Americans, and this concept of freedom in the Americas. Specifically, we'll start with the Aztecs. We'll look at their society. We'll transition over to European society and the early days of exploration. Then we'll touch on the Columbian Exchange itself through the lens of Columbus, Hernan Cortez, and the very nature of what is being exchanged. We'll then kind of work our way into Spanish Empire building, and then hopefully the French and the Dutch and their empire building. Now, just quick, side note here, we're not going to cover all this today. We've got, about a half an hour, give or take 40 minutes or so. I know I'm not going to fit all of this in today. So almost certainly I'm going to want to expand this to a second session. I'm not going to do that next week because I want to give you as much lead time as possible. But when we start that new round of classes, that second session of classes, I will put up an announcement. I'm probably going to do that after this class. So just quick, pull us out of this for a second. So I know I'm not going to cover all this content today. I can't. I don't have time. I would say let's try to start a second session on Monday next week, but next Monday is Labor Day, so we do not have class. So I'm going to be starting that second section the week after. Again, I'm going to put up an announcement about that. I'm going to remind you about that. I'm going to give you a lot of lead time if you need to change your schedule.
So we don't. Sorry for cutting off there. We don't meet at all next week.
Correct. It is a state-recognized, college-recognized holiday. It's Labor Day. So I am
We
not.
only meet on Wednesdays, right?
As of this week, yes.
Okay.
Next week, we'll still meet on Wednesdays.
Okay.
The
Cool.
week after, we're going to start meeting on Mondays and Wednesdays.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so again, just because everybody tunes in differently. This week is just Wednesday. Next week is just Wednesday. The week after is going to be on Mondays, Wednesdays. Okay, so let's jump back into here. And the Aztecs. So the first of our couple of societies we're looking at. Aztec society is really important to understand because it's one of the first societies in the Americas that Europeans make contact with. But one thing to kind of note here, the Aztecs are not the only society in Central America. There's dozens of them, and I can't possibly cover every single one of them. We'd be here for an entire semester. So we're going to use the Aztecs as kind of our case study. So what do we know about the Aztecs before European contact? Super quick. Jen asked, are the slides on Brightspace? They should be up on Brightspace. Okay, so what do we know about the Aztecs before European contact? We know that their society...
Not much from last I remember.
Oh, a little bit. We know some. So we know that their society probably started around 1200, maybe the 12 teens, maybe a little bit earlier than that, but the earliest source of anything, written source or building or anything, dates to about 1200. So where is the Aztec Empire? Really, really broadly, it's in Central America. That red outlined region on the map here is roughly the extent of kind of the beginnings of the Aztec Empire, with a couple of neighboring empires to their north and their east. But then if we zoom in a little further, this is going to be the largest extent. This is the biggest that the Aztec Empire gets, geographically speaking. We know that the society was mostly nomadic for its first 300 years or so. They may have mixed in with different societies, but not really called themselves the Aztec. Although the Aztec is the term the Spanish gives to them. They referred to themselves as Mexicas, people of Mexico, essentially. So this is a nomadic society for about 300 years, and then we see it settle as a kind of permanent, rooted society, but it's still not this massive, giant empire quite yet. It's not going to be until about 1500 that we see this kind of big land empire like this, right? Before that, they were nomadic for a while. They were also this collection of tiny city-states. So if you've taken an ancient history class, you've probably referred to this a whole bunch. Does anybody know what a city-state is or could give us a definition? Somebody besides Nelson. I love you, Nelson, but somebody else. And I'll pick on names if I have to. What's a city-state?
I just saw it on your slide that it said pre-1500, so go with that.
Well, yes. Pre-1500, the Aztec society was this kind of city-state system. But what is a city-state? How do you define what a city-state is? Anybody know? Nelson, do you know?
I do not.
Okay. So a city-state is kind of what it sounds like. It's a self-contained city that functions as its own country, essentially. So in this period where the Aztecs are in this city-state model, they don't have a single leader. They have a leader for each city. They might have their own language or their own dialect. They might have their own currency. They have their own laws. It's its own kind of self-contained mini country, and there was dozens of these. By about 1510, 1520, this is where we start to see the kind of Aztec empire we think of, this big single unified empire with its capital in the city of Tenochtitlan here. Can you guys see my cursor? I should be making it circle, circle. No, maybe not. Does this do anything? Laser pointer? Ooh, hey. That? Can you guys see a red dot?
My eyes are darting around the screen. I do not see a red dot.
Okay.
I don't see anything.
Okay. At any rate, so Tenochtitlan marked on your map there. So this becomes the de facto capital. It is the largest city in the empire and is not only the kind of center of government, but it's also the kind of cultural center to the empire. In the capital, the leader of this society, what the Europeans call an emperor, lives and conducts business. But emperor or king or something really isn't quite that accurate. Again, we're using these terms that are Eurocentric, right? King is kind of a European idea. What the Aztecs refer to their leader as is the great speaker, meaning this person speaks for everybody in their society. And in fact, the great speaker is elected. He is chosen by a group of elders from the nobility class, and we'll talk about the nobility here in a second, to serve out usually a lifelong term. So we have this kind of great speaker, this emperor, this king at the top of this unified society. Below that, you have a nobility class that hold a variety of government jobs or military jobs, even all the way down to the local level. Those in the nobility would be governors of parts of the empire in the east or the west or the south. So you have this kind of hierarchical or hierarchy structure, right? So if you have a kind of leader at the top and nobility below that, what about everybody else? Below the speaker, below the nobility, you have commoners, but not commoners in the kind of European sense or in the like the medieval Europe sense. Commoners were from a lot of different economic backgrounds or social backgrounds, but what put you into this class wasn't your job, your economic standing, any of that. It was whether or not you were in a certain clan group or family group. These groups were, excuse me, numbered about 20 by the time the Spanish make contact in the 1550s. All of them claiming lineage back to the original settlers of the Aztec Empire. So you've got these 20 different family groups made up of hundreds and hundreds of different, descendants that would be all lumped together in this single group of commoners. So that might beg a question then, what if you're not in one of those family groups? What if you're not from one of those original kind of founding families? You're referred to as Mayake. So if you're Mayake, you're not in one of those clan groups. And as a result, you have very few rights in this society. What we can assume about the Mayake is that they were non-Aztecs, because all Aztecs were born free and into a clan group of some kind. So we could then kind of further extrapolate about what the Mayake are. If they're not Aztecs and they have limited rights and they're not slaves, we'll talk about slaves in a second, who are they? Who could make up this group called the Mayake? If they're not Aztecs, they have very limited rights in this society, and they're not slaves, who could make up this group? What do you think?
Would they be like other like clans that they attacked, like different nations?
Yeah, absolutely. As the Aztec Empire kind of grows and they gobble up surrounding villages or societies, those are people that are not considered Aztecs, so they're kind of lumped into this almost non-citizen kind of group. Okay, so we've got the leader of the society, we've got nobility, we've got this kind of founding group, the commoners, the Mayake, and then we have slaves in this society as well. Slaves have no freedom of movement. They have no freedom. Let me backtrack. They have no freedom of movement, but they have some freedom of choice, but it's very, very limited. They do have certain rights in this society. And really, really, really broadly speaking, they're treated fairly well. So this is something we're going to kind of butt up against a lot in this class is like, what is slavery? It's not this kind of single flavor of what we think it might be. In Aztec society, slaves were almost treated like part of the family that owns them. They're not part of that family. They're not born to the parents that they work for, but they are almost sort of adopted into that family. But slaves in Aztec society provide a lot of different jobs, are kind of employed in different things. Female slaves typically served as cooks for the nobility. They might be weavers that make clothing. Male slaves usually worked in the fields or as day laborers like carpenters or something, or as porters. They're just like carrying heavy stuff, right? Doing the worst kind of jobs. But one really interesting kind of thread here is that slaves have more rights than the Mayake. They can eventually own land as slaves. They could own property, stuff, clothing, whatever, and could in fact eventually own slaves themselves. And one of the other big differences here in the kind of European model of slavery is that slavery in the Aztec Empire is not hereditary. So if you're a slave and you have kids, your kids do not become slaves. Okay, so let's take a step back here. We're looking at a society that is a hierarchy. Like I've said, you've got a guy at the top, you've got this kind of class structure below that. That's not that different from Europe. I'm kind of pulling in these European references here and there. It's a model that wouldn't be that foreign to a person from Spain, let's say. So that kind of begs the question, well, why are Europeans so, why do they look at the Aztecs as so different? And I'm not asking that for an answer yet. We're going to explore that here in the next couple minutes. Why do the Europeans think the Aztecs are so different? Because just on paper, they look very similar, right, to a European king or queen type system. So before we dive a little bit deeper into Aztec society, are there questions at this point about some of what we covered?
So if the slave has kids, do they become the Mayake, the kids?
No. So they would have been kind of the slave's mother or father is kind of adopted into a family, an Aztec family, and then basically become part of that family. So they'd be part of that clan group. Weird, right? It's totally counter to the kind of European model. Good question, Sam.
I have a question.
Yes, Ethan.
How do you? I didn't see a spelling of the capital on one of the slides. I must have missed it.
Yeah. Good question. I know I at least have it on a map. I want to say I have it on another slide. Let's do this. Tenochtitlan, like sort of center left of the map here.
Okay, thank you. Also, how do we go about raising our hands? I don't know if I can understand how to do that.
That's a really good question. I don't know. Maria had success with it. Maria Gonzalez, can you explain how to raise hands?
So like where it says participants next to it, it says it gives like an option for more, and then it gives like little reaction, like little emojis, and it has the like towards the bottom it says lower hand or high raise your hand. Like I think right now I still have my hand raised. I'm sorry.
You do. No, it's okay.
And yeah, yeah.
So it should be, because I'm going to go back into my PowerPoint here. Should be a thing that I shouldn't. Technology. Okay, so down at the bottom is participants, and there should be something you can click on.
I'm currently raising my hand just as an example.
Okay. Well, there you go. Does that help, Ethan? Maybe.
I just don't think I have that feature.
No,
Okay.
I found it. You got to click on participants, and then it'll show you a list of all the people to the right, and at the very bottom, it'll say invite, mute me, or raise hand. At the bottom of the list of all the.
Okay, I see it now. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah. What's up?
Can you like explain to me the nobility?
Yeah. So the nobility. Woof. Okay. Drop down menu keeps dropping down. Okay. So the nobility are people that would hold government positions. They might be advisors to the emperor. Often the nobility would be, or to reverse that, members of the military would be in the nobility. And then even on kind of a local level, a governor of part of the empire. So if you're in Tuxpan up here, the city in the kind of top right of the map, you'd be part of that nobility as well.
Okay.
And I see Avery has their hand raised. Hey. What's up, Avery?
So how would someone go about becoming a slave if it's not a hereditary thing in this society?
Very good question. Slaves were usually from a conquered city or village or something that gets gobbled up by the empire. Sometimes slaves were prisoners, people who were imprisoned and couldn't maybe pay off a debt or essentially didn't want to spend their entire lives in a prison, could opt to be a slave to kind of pay off that debt to society. So yeah, those kinds of categories of people would be thrown into the slave class.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Any others? Okay, cool. So, okay, Cooper, super quick, because I want to get to another big chunk here.
So, if you were a Maya K, was there any way to get out of being one? Like, would your children be able to get out of it, or are you stuck as?
That is a wonderful question that I don't have the answer to. I've had a student last semester ask me that, and then COVID happened, and I didn't get back around to answering it. So I don't know, and I will at least try to find out some kind of answer. Jen asks, who are the slaves? I think I missed something. Marriage. So slaves, Jen, were either people taken into the empire through conquest, through a war with a neighboring group. They might be people who are imprisoned. And
yeah, that other lady just asked it, and I typed it.
Okay.
But I said marriage because I was thinking maybe that's how a Maya K becomes part of like the Aztec cultures. Maybe, I don't know.
Okay. I don't know, and I'll yeah, I don't know. I'll try to find that out though. Thank you so much. Okay, so to kind of jump back into the idea at hand here, Nelson, I see that your hand is raised. I'm not trying to ignore you. Let me get to this next bit, and I will circle back around to you. Okay, so the kind of question at hand then is, if this society is so similar to European society, or at least is not, is cousins to like a European monarchy, why do Europeans think it's so different? I would argue that religion is probably the biggest kind of factor there. If we look a little bit deeper into Aztec society and kind of use their religious beliefs and kind of the capital city as our focus, let's start with their kind of creation myth isn't the right word, but their story about why they built the city, their capital city of Tenochtitlan, on a lake. According to their own kind of telling of things, the Aztecs say that there was an earth goddess who was pregnant with the child that would eventually become their sun god. This guy, Huitzli. No, I don't need you to know the name of this god. But according to this myth, the earth goddess was pregnant with this baby, and his two siblings, his brother and sister, were jealous of this new baby because then the baby would get all the attention that they wanted. So they're going to plot to kill their mother and the unborn child. Our sun god, Huitzli, finds out about this, and don't worry, it's not important how he finds out about it. But he finds out about this, and he emerges fully formed from his mother with a flaming serpent in his hand, cuts off both of his siblings' head, and then commands the Aztec people to settle on this lake in Central America and build their capital city there. Whoa, that is a heck of a creation myth or founding myth. But this is a kind of artistic rendering of their capital city. It is built on a lake in Central America. So you can see kind of at the if you think of it like a compass at the north, southeast, and west, roughly, there are roads leading back into the main part of the mainland, with this kind of central business / government district in the middle of the city. Here was where the two main religious temples in this city were located. We have one temple there on the left with the kind of blue and red coloring at the top. That is a temple to their sun god, Huitzli that we just talked about. And then the smaller one in the background is to their moon god. Right from kind of the outset, if we go back to our sun god here, we can say that this is a polytheistic society, right? So what is polytheism, or what does a polytheistic society mean? I see Nelson has his hand up.
It means that polytheistic is multiple gods. They believe in multiple gods.
Yeah, poly means many, right? So this society has many, many different gods. Our sun god here is almost always represented with a snake, based on that kind of foundation myth, and then usually a circle, a disc of some kind that represents the sun, which he controls. Okay, so we've got this cool polytheistic society. We've got lots of different gods that serve lots of different purposes. A couple of more that I want to highlight that are a little bit less intense, maybe. We have Xipe Totec. This is Xipe Totec. He is the god referred to as the god of filleted flesh, because his connection is to birth and death and the kind of rebirth cycle in nature. One of the stories associated with him is that he came down to Earth, saw that the Aztec people were starving and didn't have enough food, so he skins himself and then buries those skin pieces in the ground, which then fertilizes the earth and lets them grow a lot of stuff. So that's what you're seeing in this picture is in his left hand, he's holding a dagger that he's used to skin himself. And then there's wonderful, cool yellow skin flaps hanging off that he's going to bury for us. So in commemoration of this kind of sort of self-sacrifice by Xipe Totec, the festival to Xipe Totec often involved a human sacrifice to commemorate the sacrifice that he made. The most common way of doing that was through the arrow sacrifice ceremony that involved a captive person, usually a slave. And you're hearing my alarm to tell me to wrap up soon. A captive person would be tied to a wooden stake and shot with several dozen arrows so that all of his blood would kind of seep into the ground, kind of like what Xipe Totec did. Okay, so we've got this kind of intense human sacrifice ritual connected to Xipe Totec. We've got other gods that are a little less violent related. Xipe is a female goddess connected to water and rain and childbirth. And often to kind of celebrate this god, you'd make an offering of food of some kind to this goddess. So not the kind of human sacrifice, but something as simple as like a pound of wheat you'd kind of offer to this god. Okay, so we've got all these different gods, and as we mentioned here, this human sacrifice connected ritual, not just to Xipe Totec though. There are a number of different human sacrifice related rituals within the Aztec kind of pantheon. So let's dig into that a little bit deeper. Who gets sacrificed? Kind of how do you choose a person? And what's that whole process like? So let's take their sun god, who we just saw. Jump into this again. The sun god, Huitzilopochtli. So this is the god that controls the sun, right? That makes sure that the sun rises and sets every day, and it's not too hot, it's not too cold, and we can grow food and all that. So in order to make sure this god is happy, we need to offer a human sacrifice to that god. So how do you make that choice? Well, I'll kind of I'll be your performative human sacrifice. And I'm a human sacrifice because I'm going to wear a little clippy bow that my daughter told me I have to wear today. So I'm your marked human sacrifice, and I'll usually come from a village outside of the capital, right? Usually something pretty rural, but me being chosen as the sacrifice is a huge honor. We'll talk about why that is the case in a minute. So I get chosen about 3 months before the ceremony actually happens, right? And there's going to be a huge party for me in my village. There's going to be food. There's going to be a big parade. I'm like the biggest celebrity that could ever possibly exist for this little town. And that goes on for about a week. Then I am taken to the capital, where I spend the next 2 months or so literally embodying this god, right? Not that it was kind of a reincarnation idea, but I represent this god on earth. I'm basically a god, so I'm given all of the kind of trappings of that god. I'm given the best clothing. I have a kind of following of 6 or 8 people who will get me any kind of food, any kind of drink, any kind of entertainment, anything I want. It's just snap my fingers and I got it. I've got this kind of group of women who will also hang out with me. And then, I'm trained to actually be part of the ceremony. So I have to learn the kind of high language of religious ceremonies to say prayers during the ceremony. I learn an instrument, a flute, to perform during part of the ceremony. And then it's another party for like 2 months. And it's drinking every night, and it's food, and it's like the Super Bowl and American Idol and everything and the lottery all rolled into one. And then I'm going to die. So the day that I'm taken to be sacrificed, all that goes away. The ladies are gone. The food is gone. I don't have any booze. I just got my flute. And then I'm going to that temple that we saw here a minute ago. This one. I know we're almost right at the end of our time, but give me like another minute here. So I'm taken to the base of the biggest temple here, this blue and red topped temple. I got to climb up all these stairs all the way to the very top, and I'm going to be sacrificed, right? So really, my purpose is about to be fulfilled. I'm going to go to the top of that temple, climb up all of these stairs. Now, if I was in a normal kind of face-to-face class, I'd be climbing onto my table. I can't do that so much here in this office that I have. But I get to the very top of the temple, and I'm met by 6 different priests. 2 of them hold down my arms. 2 of them hold down my legs. The 5th one kind of holds my head in place, and the 6th one has a big, sharp obsidian blade. And he's going to basically cut my throat right away. Hopefully I die. Like I pass out from blood loss at the very least. But he's going to collect some of that blood for later. He will then take that same blade and basically jam it into my breastbone until the bone is broken, and kind of rip open my rib cage and pull out my heart. And that is then put in a plate and burned to be sent up to our sun god. Some of the blood that was collected is kind of taken into this guy's mouth, and he sprays it out as this kind of symbolic offering. And then my body is basically kicked down the stairs, because my body isn't that important anymore. It's just the kind of vessel that we have to like crack open like an Easter egg to get to the yummy, delicious nougat center of my soul. So after all of that, the massive celebration, the whole process of sacrificing me, in all of that, or at least, most of it, I'm really, really excited to be part of this. And again, I know we're almost at the end of our time. We got about 4 minutes left. But let me open this up to you. Why would I be so excited to do this? Because I am.
You're acting in service of the gods?
I'm acting in service of the gods, yes. And we'll kind of touch on that very specifically here in a second. Why else would I be excited?
Because you're getting treated like a god for 3 months.
Yeah.
Like, you basically are that god until you die for him.
Yeah. Did you say you are that god until you die from it? I like
basically.
That. Yeah.
That's why I think they treat him so well, is because like they're not just gonna give a god a slave. They're gonna give a god like someone who's important.
Yeah. So you're the embodiment of this god, right? So you're excited for that. Why else? Put yourself in that person's shoes. Why else might you be excited? If we can kind of think of some other possibilities. Jen says afterlife rewards. Yes, better standing in the afterlife was part of this. You're not a god. You're not at that level. But you're not like everybody else. You're way better than all y'all. You're somewhere like here, right? So better standing in the afterlife for sure. What else could we think of? Why else would I be excited to do this? How about kind of associated benefits for people that aren't just the person being sacrificed?
It'll bring respect to your village, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. You're chosen as the most important person to kind of be part of this process. Absolutely. Your family will be this kind of chosen family for this sacrifice, right? So there's all these kind of ancillary reasons, right? But one of the main ideas, and I know we're just about at the end of this session. Give me 2 more minutes maybe to explain one last point here. The main reason for something like this is this concept that the Aztec have of the cosmic mission that says, if we don't do this, if we don't sacrifice one of our own people, we're not going to live anymore. That sun god, or even, Xipe Totec, this god of like harvest and farmers and stuff, if we don't make these sacrifices, they're going to be mad at us, and then we are all screwed, right? So it's the obligation of one of our people to die for the benefit of everybody else. Let's put it a different way. This would be like me saying, everybody gets an A in this class without having to do any work, but one of you has to get an F in this class. So who of you is going to sacrifice themselves? That's the kind of situation we're talking about, obviously on a grander scale, but that's the kind of religious motivation. And to circle back to our bigger point here, that's why the Spanish, as we're going to see, are so, see the Aztecs as so different. It's this kind of religious belief and human sacrifice practice. Okay, so I am right at time at 10:35, so I'm going to stop here. My battery on my laptop is almost dead, so I definitely need to stop here. But I do have office hours right after this. If you want something explained again from lecture, I'll do that within reason. I am going to post this video of this lecture on YouTube later this morning or this afternoon. So if you came in a little bit late, you can see the rest of it. But I'm going to let you all go if you have another class to kind of get ready for. But I'll hop back on for office hours in about 5 minutes. Okay. So again, reminder, class next week on Wednesday, class the week after that is going to be Monday and Wednesday. So until next week, have a good one, guys. And I'll see maybe some of you in office hours. Bye.
All right. See ya.
Will you tell me what your YouTube channel is?
I posted it up on Brightspace. If you just search Professor Pavelko, YouTube or Professor Pavelko in YouTube, it'll pop up. It's got a bow tie icon.
Thank you.
Yep. Have a good one, guys.
You too.